Okay. My name is Jerry Gill. I'm interviewing Josh Pulver. Today is September 3, 2008. We're here in the Edna Library in the OSU campus. I'm a faculty member of Oklahoma State University Library, and this interview is being conducted as part of the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Josh, let me ask you, can you remember the first time you saw the mascot Pistol Pete?
That's tough. Yeah, it was about 1994 or 95 at a football game. And you just noticed him down on the field, you're shooting the guns, and everything. So just didn't really notice much at the time. I was just here as a young child. And
how old were you?
Let's see, I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not too young, but young, and didn't know much about the school at the time. I was not a huge OSU fan at the time, but quickly became one after those several years.
What was your first impression of Pete when you saw the guy in there, the big guy?
That's a big head. that really was my first impression. That's a huge head. I remember hitting my dad. I was like, "Dad, look at that head," and that really was about it.
Josh, let's back up and kind of ask, because you said you weren't a huge OSU fan growing up. But tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and a little bit about your life till you got to Oklahoma State.
Okay. Do you want the whole?
Abbreviated version, maybe.
Okay. Well, I was born in Newcastle, Oklahoma, and when I was 6 weeks old, we moved to Kingston, down on Lake Texoma, and lived there for 3.5 years. And after that, moved to Piedmont, Oklahoma, for 3.5 years, and my dad was moved again to Sand Springs, Oklahoma. We lived there for almost 10 years, and most of my educational career was there. And we moved towards the end of my junior year to Elk City, Oklahoma, where I finished out my school, and then moved here to Stillwater, and I've been here ever since. So.
Someone might wonder why your dad moved so often.
My dad is a United Methodist minister here in the Oklahoma Conference. Right now, he's a district superintendent in the Oklahoma City area. So,
great. What factors influenced you to come to Oklahoma State?
For one, I like the environment. And that was, I grew up a fan of another school and really fell in love with the environment here. And that was really kind of one of the major factors. And the other factor was the degree. I wanted to become a landscape contractor. And so OSU is one of the 3 schools in the nation at the time that had landscape contracting. So that was really something that I was looking into, and took advantage of that opportunity to come to school here. A couple degrees later, I finished with something else. But
tell us a little bit about your OSU experience, maybe apart from your Pistol Pete activities, where you're at OSU, some of the things you're engaged in.
I was mainly involved in the OSU marching band. My first 3 years here on campus were heavily involved with the marching band, the jazz bands, the concert band, also along with the spirit band for basketball games. And some of the more fun experiences that I've had in my life were due to my involvement with the marching band, and then Pistol Pete later, of course. But the band allowed me to go to New York my freshman year, so I have pictures on top of the World Trade Center 6 months before they came down in 2001, and then was able to go back as Pistol Pete to New York, and so I was able to visit Ground Zero, and so a lot of experiences like that, getting to go to Boston, South Carolina, things like that. Became involved with the with the off-campus student association, with the Student Government Association. I became a senator, and I was very active in helping approve the tuition. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think what is the bond. We approving the bond issue for the students to help pay for the stadium, and so that was kind of one of the vital things that came up while I was involved with SGA. But I was very involved in my church also while in Stillwater.
The stadium for maybe Gallagher Arena, the bond was that part of it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Josh, when did you first think you wanted to be Pistol Pete?
Camp Cowboy. Just before my freshman year, I came up to Stillwater and went out to Camp Cowboy and was sitting at the bonfire on Friday night, and all of a sudden I had the life scared out of me by this shotgun, and Pistol Pete came out of the woods and was shooting off the gun and took his head off right there, which is something that you are not supposed to ever see, really. We try to keep it to where people really don't see the transition from Josh Pulver to Pistol Pete or something like that. So that it doesn't remove the mystery. And so, but Pistol Pete came out and took his head off and was talking about everything that he did as a mascot and what it meant and what it represented. And that right there is the first time that I really said, "Hey, I want to be Pistol Pete."
Did you know anyone personally that'd been a Pete?
Not before that.
Mm-hmm.
I had not met anyone. I did meet that same Pistol Pete later that year in New York City. We were able to hang out together on that trip, on the basketball tournament trip, and got talking to him some more. Got to talk to him and made it a little bit better impression on me that it really was something that I could do and something that I really wanted to do. So I went for it.
Can you share with us a little bit of the tryout process, which you went through and to be a Pete?
Yeah.
Get selected.
The first year I tried out, I went in and signed in at the clinic and went through kind of a 5-day clinic. We're met each day with the current Petes and put the head on for a little bit. We went to Body Works one day to get in front of the mirror so we could see what we looked like. Went to Gallagher, the floor, to be able to see what it was like in the arena and everything that was around it. We went out to Lewis Field a couple times to see what it was like to be down there on the field with the head on and just try to put us in some different areas that provided different feel for it, and got to see, hear some of their stories and their experiences throughout the year of what they had accomplished. And then we went to try out, and that night was a very nerve-wracking night. I can remember it to this day. We had you signed up for a time to interview, and you walked into the room at your time, and you sat in front of a group of former Petes. And I remember that year there were 7 former Petes around the table, and I was at a chair in the middle of the room, and it was just unbelievably nerve-wracking. I was almost in tears. I was so nervous just because all these guys are sitting there wanting to make sure they're picking the right person, and they can be a little intimidating with that. They ask tough questions about your personality, your knowledge of OSU and the history of Pistol Pete, because they want to make sure that they are choosing someone that's not going to screw up and not embarrass the school.
What years did you serve as Pete?
I was Pistol Pete from April 2003 to April 2005.
2 years, were there 2 Petes at that time?
There were 2 Petes. I was Pistol Pete with Jared Wiley both years, and I don't know if it happened very often, but I think we were one of the few pairs that went 2 years together. But we had a good time. Jared and I were both chosen All-American both years, which is an honor and something that has always been used as kind of a bragging right among some of the former Petes.
A question. Comment is, I think, as I recall, Jared was a little smaller than that, and he used to refer to him as Big Pete and Little Pete.
Yes.
But can you share is it the handkerchief you have that identifies which one the color? Can you share that with us?
Back in the late 90s, I believe it was, one of the Pistol Petes, they're a little more similar in size than Jared and I were, and decided that so their moms could tell the difference. One would wear a white handkerchief and one would wear an orange handkerchief, and that was to tell the difference. So that's always been kind of the way people have always come up to me and asked, "Are you the white handkerchief or the orange handkerchief?"
Which one were you, Josh?
I was white. I wore the white handkerchief, and that the color handkerchief goes with the head. We have 2 different heads that we use each year, and the white handkerchief and the head, they kind of stay together. So whenever you can see the handkerchief, you can say, "Hey, I wore that head," and that was it. And it gives you a little bit of some memories come back to.
Were the heads the same, Josh?
For the most part. On the outside, it's very hard to tell any difference. On the inside of the head, they're very different. One head has kind of a lighter inside. The head that I wore has a very dark finish on the inside of it. And so it really kind of it's like you're in a black hole most of the time. The other head is kind of almost a white inside. And so you can see everything. But also the hats, the helmets that are inside are very different.
Well, come back to, so my question back to your earlier comment about being All-American, how do you get to be an All-American? Is there a process, or what's the deal there?
We go to cheerleading camp
Mm-hmm.
and mascot camp each summer.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time is where they choose All-Americans. And it's based on your performance, your creativity, your dedication to being there on time, for one. You know, a lot of things go into it. And it's mainly your performance there at that camp that determines whether you become All-American or not. So
How many attend, and out of that, how many make, quote, All-American status?
we probably had, my first year, we probably had around 20 mascots, and about 12 of us got All-American. So it varies from year to year, and there wasn't a set amount that they would have for each camp or not. It's really kind of who stands out as the mascot. So it really is kind of an honor, but you know, a lot of it kind of for me, it was just, well, I guess the other mascots were pretty bad.
Did
So
you have to be asked to participate in the competition, or did you get, or could anyone enter?
well, I mean,
School
well, it
mascot?
was your school. I mean, whether your school went or not. I mean, that was based. We did skits and everything like that, and it was based on your performance in those skits. So there really wasn't a competition per se, but just kind of how well you performed during your sessions and everything like that.
Well, you were talking earlier about your Pete hat and so on. Can you tell a bit about the outfit that you had? I mean, let's start with the head, and then we'll talk about maybe the rest of it. But
Okay.
you described it a little bit, but could you elaborate on that some?
The head, you know, it's a 45 pounds of fiberglass, and it'll sit just, you know, it's there the entire time. Of course, I don't think you'd ever have 45 pounds on your body and not know it's there. But I've never seen something so well balanced in my life. I could shrug my shoulders, and to where my head was totally out of the helmet inside that is usually used to stabilize it, and it would just sit perfectly balanced on my shoulders. And that was just amazing to me that something so big could be so well balanced. And so that was something that was just kind of weird. But you know, the eyes on Pistol Pete are strictly what you see out of, and so you have a straight vision, straight forward, and then we also have a hole in the chin on the head so you can see down to write autographs. Most of the time, people will see Pistol Pete looking straight forward, signing an autograph right down here near his stomach, and people are like, well, what are you doing? And so we try not to tell very often what we're doing, but we're inside the head looking like this, signing an autograph.
Does that help see the little kids too? They're down here a lot.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's been several times where you didn't see a kid till they were right there, just running right into you. So, and it's a rude awakening sometimes.
So the vest and the outfit. I mean, where do you say? Of course, the university provides the head. What about the rest? You know, you got the chaps, right? The vest and so on.
We the university purchases us 4 pairs of white shirts now. I don't know what it used to be, so I'm not going to brag. I'm not going to say too much. I don't want the older guys to get mad, but 4 pairs of Wranglers and 4 white shirts, and then on top, and then with that, they provide us with a vest each year, a black leather vest, chaps. They get handed down each year, orange leather chaps, and then a gun belt with a gun, of course, and that all of that gets handed down each year. But then also the university purchases us orange boots, and I was lucky enough that we had some custom boots made. One year I found a really good deal with OSU Alumni. They used to have the boot and saddle shop, and a great place. You know, they made our chaps and our boots that year, and did a phenomenal job for us. But all of that, and also the Ellsberries donate money for spurs every year. So each Pistol Pete will get a set of spurs while they're Pistol Pete. So, and that started in 2003.
What about kind of come back to the question? Compensation anyway. I mean, did you get a scholarship for being Pete, or is there some way you're compensated for the time you spent being a Pete?
We're not on scholarship. We're not a scholarship student athlete. We are considered student athletes, but we're not on scholarship. The compensation we do receive is for doing private appearances away from the university. We'll do birthday parties, weddings, go to the hospital, do some hospital visits, other things like that. And we charge a small fee for that, mileage, and then an amount per hour that we're in character.
Josh, speaking of that, how many appearances would you make, say, athletic related and non-athletic related, just yourself and then both Pete's together in a year's time?
My first year, I know I did around 250 appearances.
Yourself?
Yes. And then, so between the two of us, I think we did around 500, close to 500. It was probably in the 280 to 500 range. 480 to 500 range. So, and then the next year was actually, I went up a little bit, and I think I did around 260. Not by much, but a little bit more. So it all depends on how athletics are doing, because not only just doing athletic appearances, you'll go further in the tournament or something like that, but OSU fans tend to have Pistol Pete come out for some more events when OSU athletics are doing well. So we really did kind of see a fluctuation based on the season to see what was going on.
About what percentage breakdown? How many of those would be personal? Out of those, say you made two and yourself made about 250.
A good majority. Over 50%. And I'd hate to say too much more than that, because when we get to basketball season, there's a month there, not a month, but several weeks where you have men's basketball, women's basketball, wrestling, softball, and baseball. And so that was, we had 5 different sports going on at the same time, and there was a couple of weeks there where almost every day you were doing an athletic event. And then on top of that, you're doing other appearances at the same time. So, I'd say the majority were private appearances, but we also did quite a bit for the athletic department.
Josh, was it, your experiences as Pete, was anything like you thought it'd be? Kind of going in and looking at it after.
It was so much more. Going into it, I tried out twice before I was chosen. My first year tryout, I was not chosen as Pistol Pete. And I was devastated. And the second year I tried out, I was chosen as Pistol Pete, and immediately it was the best 2 years of my life, Jerry. And it was just one of those deals that, the memories that I have from that time will last with me forever. And I hope they do, because it was such an awesome time, not just as Pistol Pete, but a lot of that reflected into both. Just my regular life too. We had a lot of fun, made a lot of new friends that I would not have met if I hadn't been Pistol Pete. And I really cherished those 2 years.
Josh, did you have difficulty balancing your two lives as Pete? Can you kind of share what a typical week might be like for you?
Which season? It was very different. There was not 1 week. There were not 2 weeks identical. It really kind of depended on, was it a home game or away game? Was it basketball season? Because you might have 2 or 3 games in 1 week, or 4 games, and depending on the season like that. But during the summer, it was pretty quiet a lot of times. Because there's nothing athletic-wise going on. So all of your appearances were private appearances during the summer. And so that was kind of a dead time for me during the summer, just kind of going about. I did some of my practicums for my courses, and so I did a lot of that during the summers. But during the school year, carrying 12 hours of school of class was very demanding in itself for some people, myself included. I think I maintained 14 hours the entire time I was Pete, which is not a whole lot of hours, but when you add a full-time job on top of that, it becomes a pretty good workload. Between classes, there were a lot of times I went to classes wearing my Wranglers and my shirt, or my Wranglers and a t-shirt, because I'd have to leave right after class to go to an appearance. I remember one Friday I had a class and left class just a little bit early so I can try to make it to Tulsa for an event, and I ended up having to make it to Tulsa in about 45 minutes. So it was some of those things that you just really you tried to make it work, and you studied when you could, and for me it was amazing. My best GPAs were while I was Pete. I was not a very good student before I was Pete, but I think part of it had to do with I was into a major that I was very interested in. And the courses meant something to me. And so I was able to focus on them a lot more and spend the time that they needed to make good grades.
Probably had to manage your time.
Yes. And that's one thing that I did find out was when I was busy, I had to get things done. There wasn't a question. I had to go through and do it all. But then when I found out that earlier and later, that when I had a little more time on my hands, I wasn't in such a hurry to get things done and would put things off a little more.
Going back to your on-field experiences, Josh, can you tell us how you felt the first time you went out and being used Pistol Pete?
It was crazy. It was the day after I became Pistol Pete. I did a softball game, and we've always had such an importance on gun safety, and that was the first time I ever shot a pistol. Now I had used shotguns and everything like that quite a bit, but the first time I ever shot a pistol was at that softball game, and it was a little nerve-wracking. I knew gun safety, and I knew everything about it, but I'd never shot a pistol before, and so that was very nerve-wracking for me. But also it was amazing because it was something that I had been trying to do for a year and a half at least. I'd been striving to become Pistol Pete for a year and a half, and it was just I walked in to the locker to the office area at the softball stadium, and opened up the sack that was holding the head, and I was just like, wow, I've accomplished it, and I've accomplished one of my major goals in life, and it was just such an awesome experience that first time, just to put the head on and go out and shake hands and mess with the police officers a little bit. You have to give them a hard time, but it was I will remember that time forever.
Was there a particular sporting event or venue or setting that you enjoyed more than the others, Pete?
There was one specific, I have one football and one basketball, and the basketball event that really stands out to me was when we beat St. Joseph's in the Elite Eight in 2004. We were not supposed to win that game because St. Joseph's was on a hot streak that year, but we had been on a hot streak too. One of the best years for Cowboy basketball in a long time, winning wise, and so we went into that game and just came out, and then John Lucas's last second shot sealed the deal for us, and then when Nelson missed his shot on the other end, the place just went crazy, and I ran out on the court, and was just elated. I was just, the emotions going through you at the time, you can't explain to someone because there's just so much joy. The first thing I did was I found the guy that hands out all the hats to the team and the guy that hands out all the T-shirts. And so I grabbed a hat and a T-shirt from him. So I had a souvenir. And the St. Joe's fans were very bad. I would put them above OU on the worthless column. And that's just fans wise. And this might be one of those things that we could take out of the transcript. But so we should have you on camera too.
Your football experience is on it.
My OU football experience, but it was that was an awesome. They let me climb up and cut down part of the net, and then I also got to share a seat with Barry Sanders on the way back to the hotel. So that evening was by far one of the best evenings of my life because it was incredible. Football, one of the best times that I ever had was at the Cotton Bowl. Just the history there at the Cotton Bowl, and being able to, the Alumni Association had a huge tailgate party. There was over 4,000 people there, wasn't there? There was a whole lot of people there, and just walking into that building and the place went crazy, and with the cheers and everything that were going on, the electricity there at the Cotton Bowl was just amazing, and that's also something, the Sea of Orange. Taking up the entire half of the stadium. That was amazing because I could go to any side of the stadium and lead a cheer, and it was awesome. And people were just going nuts because we were at the Cotton Bowl. We'd been through some bad seasons there in a row, and we'd been to the Houston Bowl the year before, but to reach the Cotton Bowl, that was a big deal for us. And a lot of excitement with OSU then.
So, and again, did you enjoy, I mean, like I say, wrestling, basketball, football? Was there a sport you enjoyed being peed at more than another?
Yes.
What was your favorite?
Football.
Football?
I'm a big guy, of course, as you mentioned earlier, Big Pete. But football was the one sport where I could easily move around and not have to worry about being in anyone's way. Basketball games was tough on me because I have to spend most of the time sitting on the floor and then getting up, sitting down, getting up, sitting down. And I was really confined. Now I did make 2 half-court shots, and that was a good time at basketball. So, those, but football really, hands down was my favorite sport.
Well, Josh, going back to, we're talking about being Pistol Pete and so on. What did you study up on Frank Eaton? The character of Frank Eaton, Frank Pistol Pete Eaton's who we named our mascot after.
Yeah.
What do you remember about Frank Eaton that you tried to portray in your Pete?
I think one of the things that stood out to me the most was his toughness. And I had heard stories, and when you hear stories about someone, you never know just how much of a tall tale it is. Especially, but I had someone tell me one time that Frank used to work barefoot in his blacksmith shop, and they told me that one time they were watching him work in his blacksmith shop and watched him pick up a coal with his toes and put it back in the fire, and that's pretty hard to believe just because of how hot those coals get. But the person remembered that about him, and it just seemed to me that no matter what the story was, Frank Eaton was a very tough man, and at least portrayed that. So in everything I did, I tried to portray a big, tough man, but at the same time, a man that had a big heart. And Frank seemed the person that would always do something to help someone else out. And the fact that he had so much love for his father, to avenge his father's death, that those little things just seemed big to me. And so I tried to portray not only a toughness but a caring side of Pistol Pete. And I think that's what, if someone does remember me as Pistol Pete, that they would remember me for being big but also being a caring Pete.
Well, does it make a difference? Did it to you? You think about mascots in different schools versus Pistol Pete, that Pistol Pete was based on a real person?
Yeah, it does. Gives you a sense of pride that you really are portraying someone. When you have like a cougar or a wildcat, that's something that anybody can be. But somebody really was Pistol Pete. And there's a heritage to it and a pride that goes along with being able to say that I was able to portray Pistol Pete. Especially here at Oklahoma State University, that means that a group of people thought that you were worth representing not only the mascot but the university, and then beyond that, not only the university but in some cases the heritage of our state and in this area.
So you feel like the Pete better captures the spirit of OSU and say the state than other mascots do?
Yeah, I don't think the tiger represented the heritage very well, and it's understandable why the tiger was our mascot, and that's a part of our history and heritage, and so I appreciate that. But Frank really was kind of a good symbol of the Wild West and what really kind of what happened around here during those times, in my opinion. So I believe it was a good choice to make him our mascot.
Josh, did you feel a special sense of responsibility in representing the university as Pistol Pete?
I did. There were you're under a magnifying glass as Pistol Pete most of the time, and it's just the simple fact that when you have that head on, doesn't matter what you do, somebody's going to see it. And even if it's during a play, if you fall over or do something, someone's going to notice it. And so I found myself really analyzing my actions while I had the head on, because when I was Pete, I wasn't Josh anymore, And so I tried to do away with most of the reactions that Josh Pulver might have, and really kind of do it as Pistol Pete would have. If we fumble the ball, I'm not going to sit there and whine about it, which I wouldn't anyways as myself. I don't want you to think that, but Pistol Pete's going to be very encouraging to the team as the mascot. That's your job. And I remember one of the hardest times I ever had was my last year to do it, and we played Texas here in Stillwater in basketball, and we were supposed to win that game and go on. And ESPNU debuted here in Stillwater that weekend, and had a great time. And it was such a great game, and we lost at the end of the game. And I remember being inside the head and just bawling my eyes out because it was my last game in Gallagher Arena. Such a huge game for us, and we were losing it. But at the same time, while I was crying, my hands were clapping. And I'll never forget that feeling because it was such an odd feeling to me to be crying on the inside and not be able to stop crying, but then be clapping at the same time and trying to, with emotion. So it was really weird. That's one thing that I enjoyed about Pistol Pete was that no matter what expression you had on the inside, you could show something different with your emotions.
Josh, did you enjoy the interaction with OSU fans and maybe particularly kids? You might tell us a little bit about that.
I did. Baseball games, I could literally sit down in one spot and sign autographs for several innings straight. And kids they would bring anything they could find to get signed. Whether it was something that their parents really did not want them to have signed and they snuck away from them, or body parts. I signed little kids' fingers a couple times, and I'm going to tell you right now, that's pretty hard to sign a child's finger. That's not very easy. But that was some of the interaction that we really had. The fans, I loved to lead cheers, and we really got Jared and myself trained the fans to follow us pretty well when we were leading cheers. And so I'd go out on the field especially and rack off the shotgun a couple shots and lead an OSU or something like that. And I took that as one of my other personal responsibilities to keep the fans involved with the game and cheering to help the team on.
Josh, you mentioned earlier a couple of special times for you, but can you think of some other special moments, maybe weren't the highlight, shot that won the game, but just special memories you have of Ben Pete?
Yeah. Special Olympics was an awesome time. And I've always had a very special place in my heart for children or adults with developmental disabilities. And that's the thing I've always enjoyed about Special Olympics is that it doesn't matter, to anybody there, and everyone there is unique in their own way, which we all are anyways. But to me, that's just kind of the epitome of acceptance has been Special Olympics, because everyone's an athlete, everyone is a star there, and everyone accomplishes some type of goal. And that's something that was just an awesome experience for me. One other experience that I had that I'll never forget happened just a few weeks before I stopped being Pistol Pete, and was called by some nurses in Guthrie, at the hospital in Guthrie, to come visit a gentleman who was dying of cancer. And went down to the hospital and walked into his room. They had purchased an orange hospital gown for him with a Pistol Pete on it, and walked into the room, and it was a total surprise to the family that Pistol Pete was there. They had no idea that Pistol Pete was coming. So I walked into the room, and the gentleman was lying in his hospital bed, and just started bawling. And the joy in his eyes, but also the tears, that Pistol Pete had come to visit him, and how much it meant to him that Pistol Pete had come to visit him, overwhelmed me. And also, part of the fact was that he could have passed for my grandfather's identical twin brother. And that really kind of hit me hard. My grandfather had some medical problems around that time. And so to see this gentleman in a hospital bed that looked exactly like my grandfather, and he was crying, that I had come to visit him, well, the Pistol Pete had come to visit him, just really took my breath away. And I sat there for about 10 minutes just holding his hand. And he just kept thanking me for coming and everything. And it's one of those experiences that you just take away from it, and you know that while it touched them, it changed my life more than anything, and that's one of those very special moments in my life.
What you talking about some of those special moments that you had? What did you at the what did being Pistol Pete at the time? What did it mean to you?
I had always wanted to be a mascot, but my involvement with marching band and football in high school never allowed me to accomplish that goal. And so being a mascot was something that I always wanted to do. I loved being an idiot. And, I don't mean that in a bad way. My mom has always called me her little idiot, which is a compliment because I'm not afraid to make a fool of myself. And I think, quite honestly, that's one of my finer qualities is that I can take myself and embarrass myself sometimes, but not in a bad way. And I don't want to come across that way, but might embarrass myself to cause someone else to bring some joy to someone else's life. And that's one thing that I've always enjoyed doing, and being Pistol Pete allowed me to do that. So many people found joy in having Pistol Pete around, and it was just the fact that he's a fun guy, a big guy with a big head, like I mentioned earlier. But what he represents and everything, it was just really an awesome experience to be able to hide my own identity and still be able to have fun with people. I mean, it was one of those things that, seriously, to be able to be someone else for a minute and have fun with it is an awesome experience. But then also be able to be yourself at the same time and allow your personality to come through that character really was a great experience for me.
Josh, you're talking about kind of making a fool of yourself, but can you think, picking up on that, you think of your most embarrassing moment or moments that you had as a Pete?
Yeah, I can tell you a couple. Probably my most embarrassing moment was I used to run with a flag behind the cheerleaders after touchdowns. Bullet would run out, and then the cheerleaders would follow Bullet, and then I would follow the cheerleaders, with my flag. And that was just kind of a staple of what I did. When I was Pistol Pete and we scored a touchdown, I would run out with my flag and wave it in the field and then run back off the field. And last ever football game at Boone Pickens Stadium for me, we were playing Baylor, and usually I did the pregame, and then Jared would do the first half and I would do the second half. Well, Jared wasn't ready to come on the field yet. He hadn't changed. And so I was still Pistol Pete when we scored our first touchdown, which was very quickly in the game as we were playing Baylor. But so I grabbed my flag and I was running up behind the cheerleaders, and I got to the end zone, and darned it if that carpet didn't reach up and grab my foot. And I tripped and I just slid in the end zone, and it was pretty funny because even after the game, you could see the marks on the turf from the little black rubber pellets where I had slid, where my legs had slid on the turf. And I caught myself out with my hands and with the flag, and the head never came off. And that was the one thing I remember myself thinking the entire time was, please God, do not let this head come off. But the head bounced on the ground and everything, and I don't know how I kept that head on. But but I did, and I immediately got up and kept running and walked over the sidelines, put my flag down on the ground, and walked right off into the tunnel and took the head off. I was done for a little bit because it hurt, because the face had hit me in the head, and it was an experience. The funny thing was my mom was videotaping it at the time, and so we have the memory of that happening. And it was funny because you can see the video camera following me out, and all of a sudden, right after I fall, the video camera cuts off. And that's where my mom had put the camera down to come and see if I was okay. But then all of a sudden the camera comes back on and I'm back running around. And so it was a fun experience. But I dropped my gun one time, and that's also very embarrassing because you're supposed to be a gun expert, twirling and everything, and to drop your gun is not a very good thing.
You have trouble finding it with your
Actually, finding the gun wasn't hard. Finding the bullet that I dropped one time on the field, that was hard because it was a black bullet. And I knew I was right in that area, so I was searching around everywhere, and finally I found it. But that was pretty amazing. Basketball, probably my most embarrassing time was I hit the cameraman 3 times attempting half court shots. And just the guy with the video camera for the Jumbotron, I hit him 3 times. And it made it a little bit better that I'd gone to high school with the gentleman. So I wasn't hitting a total stranger. But still, I went over and gave him a big hug afterwards to apologize for hitting him 3 times with a basketball. So
earlier you talked about what it meant to you to be Pete.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back now, years past, what does it mean to you now, having been a Pete?
It is an extreme sense of accomplishment for me. Throughout my life, I had strived and tried out for several things, and had usually fallen short. And for me personally, it was just the fact that there was something I wanted, and I greatly wanted it, and couldn't think of anything else I wanted at the time, and accomplished it, and became Pistol Pete. That for me was a very provided a lot of personal growth, and it was just throughout that experience, the personal growth that I experienced through being Pistol Pete, not only being able to accomplish a goal, but then being able to carry it out and learn time management skills and communication skills, because you deal with a lot of people. That was probably, those 2 years were probably the most personal growth I've seen, aside from after graduation. The last 3 years being a graduate, I've seen a lot of growth. But as far as my educational career, those 2 years were probably the most personal growth that I've ever witnessed. But aside from that, dealing with alumni now, working at the Alumni Association, you see that sparkle in their eye when they see or talk about Pistol Pete. And just knowing that you were able to be a part of that really kind of gives you a nice little.
Do you find yourself being, as part of your introduction to an individual or an audience, and say former Pete? Does that happen to you? Does that come up much?
Not that often. That goes back to when I was Pete. I think part of it was some of my personal experiences, not having. There were times I didn't have an identity. I was Pistol Pete, and I'm not gonna say I got tired of that, because there's nothing wrong with being known as Pistol Pete, but I also wanted my own identity at the time, and I wanted to be Josh Pulver instead of just, hey, this is Pistol Pete. And my grandparents forgot that a couple times, that I had a name besides this is my grandson Pistol Pete. So but right now, that really, it might be something that comes up in conversation later, but that's not any part of my initial introduction.
Is there still a special bond, Josh, that exists between former Pistol Petes?
I think there is.
Get together? Do you reminisce?
Mm-hmm. I think any time that you have that you're a part of a group of people, and you share an experience that not very many other people do, that's going to automatically give you a bond. And I can talk to a former Pete that was 20, 30 years ago, or even longer than that, and you automatically have something in common, and you can share your experiences. But even if you don't get into what happened while you're Pistol Pete, you still have that common bond, and you can find other things to talk about at the same time, and what else was going on in your life at the time. But it really, we really do. We're able to come together and share some of our funny stories and some of our do's and don'ts. Oh, you don't want to do this, and you want to try to do this a little bit too. So it provides a good group.
And speaking of being remembered as Pete, your legacy, Josh. I mean, how do you want to be remembered as Pete?
As a Pete?
Yeah, you can remember for your years as a Pistol Pete.
Yeah, that's a tough question. You're going to have to bear with me a little bit on this one.
Okay, we can come back to it if you want.
Well, I don't know if I've ever thought about it before. I think, kind of going back on what I said earlier, being remembered as someone that allowed my personality to come through, but realized that it was not myself. I want to be remembered as somebody that was fun, and that goes into kind of my life. My life hopes and dreams too. But as Pistol Pete, especially, I want to be remembered as somebody that represented the university well, was never inappropriate, but also someone that was able to help inspire others at sporting events and bring joy to people. Does that?
Great answer, and I liked your earlier comment about portraying Pete as a tough guy, but a guy with a big heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's I wasn't wanting to totally repeat myself again, but it's true. Pistol Pete to me has always been larger than life, and being a fairly large man, that was something that I was able to help portray, I think. But also, I love to give people hugs all the time. I would hug anybody. I would almost hug somebody before I'd shake their hand. As Pete, and that wasn't, just being a hugger, but I mean showing love. I think that's one of the things the world needs more of right now, especially today. You need to share love with people, and I'm not weird about love, but just reach out to people and care.
You alluded to some of this, but how did being Pistol Pete change your life?
It gave me confidence. It gave me a new confidence that I didn't have before. And while as Pistol Pete, you walk with a swagger, it allowed me to personally not walk with a swagger or be cocky, but be more confident in my everyday life, and to approach situations or people with more confidence. I think is really one of the areas that really affected me. Not only that, but I became more self-reliant. As Pistol Pete, you have to go a lot of places, and you have to figure out how to get there. And and that's just kind of a small thing, but going to Dallas or other cities like that, you're really learning how to get around. Really, kind of will change your outlook on things because you're not afraid to get out there and try new things. And I think that was really something for me that really helped out.
Some lessons and some disciplines that you learned.
Mm-hmm. Personal restraint is a huge lesson that a lot of people need to learn more of, and but that's also something that comes into it. Especially as a mascot when you're out there, and Pistol Pete's different from other mascots. Other mascots have a full body suit, to where you really don't know who's in that character a lot of times. But Pistol Pete, if you know the two Pistol Petes at the time, you're going to be able to pretty much tell who it is. And especially with this, they do the calendars and everything, but it really kind of holds you accountable to your actions while you're out there. And so personal, like I said, personal restraint is something that you really have to, if you don't have it before, you need to learn it quickly, because you can embarrass yourself and the university very easily.
You talked about discipline, managing your time, what your grades,
Mm-hmm.
order of your activities.
Yeah. When it comes down to scheduling appearances, because that's something that we do. The athletic department will just send us the requests, and we manage the appearances based on our class schedule and our other appearances. And so deciding what you can do in your allotted time, the 24 hours of a day, making sure that you manage that time appropriately, and knowing that you need time to study, but also that class does come first, and learning things like that really did help me out a lot. I mean, really able to manage time.
Josh, what would you tell a young man today who was considering being Pistol Pete?
Do it. Make sure you're in it for the right reasons. I think, and I don't think I don't know of anyone that's ever not done it for the right reason. But, some people go into it not really fully not realizing just how much of dedication it takes to be Pistol Pete. You have to be dedicated 100% to being Pistol Pete, or it may not work out for you. It's very tough. It's not going to be easy, but it's definitely something that's worth the struggle to become Pistol Pete and then portray him throughout the year.
Josh, would you do it again? Looking back, knowing what you know now?
Would I do it now again, or would I do it back then again?
Back, if you had a chance to do it again as a student.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was at the end of each year you have to try out again if you want to try it. If you want to continue, you have to try out. And so at the end of our first year, Jared and I both tried out for a second year. And that was one of the questions they asked me was, do you think that you will enjoy being Pistol Pete as much a year from now as you would do right now? And my answer was simple, that at that time, after finishing my first year, I wanted to be Pistol Pete another year more than I had wanted to be Pistol Pete before I ever forgot it. And I think that it really there's nothing I regret about it. The 2 years was a perfect time. At the end of that 2 years, my body was starting to wear down a little bit physically, my knees, because you're carrying about 70 pounds of extra weight on you all the time. And so it became at the time where there was never an appearance that I dreaded. Never a time that I dreaded being Pistol Pete. It was always a joy. And you never want to get to the point where you're dreading being Pistol Pete. Because when you don't find the joy in it anymore, people will pick up on that and you won't be as effective.
Josh, are any kind of closing thoughts you'd have or comments you'd want to make that we didn't ask or talk about?
I think just in closing, we really do have something special here at Oklahoma State University with Pistol Pete. New Mexico State and Wyoming have both used their versions of Pistol Pete, but the fact that Frank Eaton lived here around this area really does provide the history and the heritage that we have here. And Frank Eaton was our mascot. So it really does provide some pride in that. And that's something that is not to be taken lightly. And I don't think that anyone that has ever put on the head of Pistol Pete does take lightly. That's something that we all cherish, and we all know just how powerful it is.
Appreciate it, Josh.
Thank you, Jerry.